Chapter 12 of our text, the last chapter, deals with communication climates. And you can describe a relationship that you have with someone else in terms that you would normally describe the weather. You might say it's fair and warm, stormy, hot, cold. Interpersonal relationships have unique climates. So this chapter, we're going to look at the first two segments in this video. What is a communication climate and how do communication climates develop? So communication climate, the term itself, refers to the social tone of a relationship. A climate doesn't involve specific activities as much as the way people feel about each other as they carry out those activities. So relationships, whether they're romantic relationships, friendship relationships, family relationships, can be defined by their social tone. Another obvious context for observing a climate's impact is the workplace, and certainly it's been studied widely in the workplace. Employees have a higher level of commitment at jobs in the workplace in which they experience a positive communication climate. So, metaphorically or literally, climates are shared by everyone within them. It's rare to find one person describing a relationship as hot and the other one as cold, as positive and the other person as negative. So communication climates, however, can change over time in the relationship. A relationship can be overcast at one point in time and then sunny at the next. And people can change their communication climates. And that's why it's important to understand communication climates in general. So let's dive into the first major section, and that is, how do communication climates develop? Communication climates are determined largely by the degree to which people see themselves as being valued. So there's the key term, value. Communicators who perceive others as liking, appreciating, and respecting them will react positively, whereas those who feel unimportant or abused will react negatively in that particular climate. So, confirming communication describes either direct or indirect messages that convey valuing. By contrast, disconfirming communication signals a lack of regard for the other person. In one way or another, you are saying to them, you don't matter, you don't exist, you're not important. So it's hard to overstate the importance of confirming messages and the impact or the negative impact of disconfirming ones. You see this in children who do not receive confirming messages will suffer a broad range of emotional and behavioral problems. Confirming communication by teachers has been shown to enhance in-class participation, especially from students who are apprehensive about talking. A confirming climate in marriage is one of the best predictors of marital satisfaction. If children see their parents regularly engage in confirming communication, they're more than likely to replicate those patterns in their own romantic relationships later on in life. So, the interpretation of a message as confirming or disconfirming is somewhat subjective. Consider, for example, when you heard a comment that may have sounded unsupportive to an outsider, like, you're such a nerd, whereas that is a sign of affection within the relationship. So you need to know something about the way people normally speak to each other to understand the tone of that message. So levels of confirming, of message confirmation, and here's a range, going from confirming to disagreeing to disconfirming. So let's start off with confirming, we'll go to disagreeing, and then we'll go to disconfirming. Even your best attempt at confirming messages can be misinterpreted. Research shows that 3 increasingly positive types of messages have the best chance of being perceived as confirming, and they are recognition, acknowledgement, and endorsement. The first one, recognition. indicates your awareness of the other person. This is where you make eye contact. This is where you offer a smile. It can be done verbally, like saying glad to see you or I'll be right with you. On the other hand, avoiding eye contact can send a negative message. Acknowledgement, this is where you pay attention to the ideas and feelings of others. And it's more than simple recognition. So phrases that you would use are the following: I see your point, I understand how you feel. These certainly communicate acknowledgement. Endorsement means that you agree with or support the other person. So it is greater than acknowledgement, and it's the highest form of confirmation. So you can verbally endorse others by agreeing with them, you're right about that, or by offering compliments, nice job doing that, or giving praise, that's the best presentation I've ever heard. Endorsement can also happen non-verbally to positive effect. Maintaining eye contact, nodding can confirm the value of the speaker's idea. Disconfirming or disagreeing messages, and then disconfirming messages. Disagreeing messages essentially says you're wrong. In its most constructive form, disagreement includes two of the confirming components just described, and that is recognition and acknowledgement. At its worst, a strong disagreeing message can be so devastating that the benefits of recognition and acknowledgement are lost. Two ways to disagree without being disconfirming are argumentativeness and complaining. The first one, argumentativeness, is the ability to create a sound argument. And we admire that trait in lawyers, talk show participants, and debaters. Communication researchers define argumentativeness as presenting and defending positions on issues while opposing positions are taken by others. So argumentativeness can coincide with a number of positive attributes, especially in the USA, of course, such as leadership emergence, communication competence, and a willingness to confront others when you are wrong. The way you present your ideas, of course, makes all the difference in maintaining a positive climate while arguing a point. It's crucial to be sure you are evaluating positions or issues and not attacking individuals in their personal capacity. Complaining. When communicators don't want to argue, they may still want to register their dissatisfaction. They will engage in complaining. Some ways of complaining are more constructive than others. Personal complaints are more likely to result in an escalated conflict episode. This is when the complaint is aimed at the personal characteristic rather than the way something is done necessarily. Complaints about personal characteristics attack a more fundamental part of the presenting self. Talking about socks deals with a habit that can be changed. Calling someone a slob is a character assault that is unlikely to be forgotten when the conflict is done. So, complaining is not a sign of a troubled relationship necessarily. In fact, it may be a sign of a healthy relationship where spouses are able to get their concerns out in the open. So complaining can be a relationship constructing tool that encourages bonding and increased intimacy within romantic relationships. When couples complaining turns to criticism and contempt, then it's a sign of relational trouble. Disconfirming messages, on the other hand, can be more subtle than disagreeing ones, but potentially more damaging. Disconfirming communication implicitly says, you are not valued, you do not exist. Now, disconfirmation can be communicated in small ways. When a friend interrupts you, you probably feel devalued. When the friend goes off on an irrelevant tangent or gives an impersonal response, it's no big deal, or ignores your message. These are all levels of disconfirmation. But some disconfirming is more intentional and usually more injurious. And these are aggressiveness and ostracism. So verbal aggressiveness is the tendency to attack another person's character, their background, or their identity. It demeans the worth of the other person, and it may be name-calling, put-downs, sarcasm, taunting, yelling, badgering, and even some types of humor. Communication research has linked aggressiveness to a host of negative outcomes, such as, of course, lowered self-esteem, occupational burnout, juvenile delinquency, depression, violence, and even mortality. Now, one form of aggressiveness, bullying, has received a good amount of attention in research. And bullying occurs in a variety of contexts, in family, at school, between bosses and employees, between professors and students. And certainly the internet gives bullies more channels for engaging in verbal aggressiveness. So if you're on the receiving end of bullying, it's important for you to find an appropriate and constructive way to respond by standing up for yourself rather than being aggressive and trying to put the other person down. Ostracism is the worst type of disconfirming. This is where you are ignored altogether. It's been called the social death penalty because it purposely excludes others from interaction. It may be done in terms of a group or may be done in a one-to-one relationship. It involves the silent treatment, ghosting, and stonewalling. All right, causes and effects of defensiveness. It's no surprise that some disagreeing and most disconfirming messages can pollute a communication climate. The most predictable reaction to a hostile or indifferent message is on your side, and that is defensiveness. And this is where you protect yourself from attack. It's not a physical attack. It could be a physical attack, but very often it's not a physical attack. It's more about preserving yourself and face. So the presenting self consists of the physical traits, personality characteristics, attitudes and aptitudes, and all the parts that you want, all the parts of your image that you want to present to the world. All right, and we project different selves to different people. When others are willing to accept and acknowledge the important parts of our presenting self, there's no reason to feel defensive. However, when others confront us with face-threatening acts, messages we perceive as challenging the image that we want to project, we are more than likely to resist to that. And that is called defensiveness. Is the process of protecting our presenting self, our face. So, responding defensively to a face-threatening attack may seem logical, but over time, continued defensiveness will erode relationship stability. So how does defensiveness operate? Well, imagine that an instructor criticizes you in front of the class for making a mistake. How would you respond? Or can you imagine if a friend called you self-centered or your boss called you lazy? You'd be threatened if these attacks were untrue. But sometimes you and I respond defensively even when we know the other person's criticism is justified. So we've talked about defensiveness as if it were the responsibility of the person who feels threatened. Well, for the person who's a competent communicator, there's a ethical need really to protect others' face needs as well as their own. And so we must be careful to protect our students' presenting face when offering constructive criticism, even as an instructor. So all communicators contribute to the climate of a relationship. The next section will deal with creating supportive climates.